Welcome back, everyone, to Underground Graphics. I am your installer, Gian. We are here again with the Bronco Sport doing a quick install. Now, for this one, we have a little bit of a twist on what was already produced for the big Bronco. This one is the Drift. So we do have that, like I said, for the bigger one. This one has been modified to fit the smaller Broncos and give you that more aggressive look for the road. Before we get into that, I do want to go over cleaning and the environment that you want to be in when you're doing this install. Here we have our soap and water mix as well as our alcohol water mix. Now, if you've looked at our previous videos, this is the same as before. However, these ones are purchasable on our website, so that is a little bit easier for you guys to get your hands on it and not have to worry about that mixture anymore. Next up, we have clean microfiber towels. Now, you can either purchase those from a store, or if you have some, just make sure that they are washed, that you don't have any contaminants that are on them, so that way it doesn't transfer to your paint. After that, we have a good, clean, sharp pair of scissors. You don't want anything that's going to be rough or that would have a dull blade. You want to make sure those scissors are fresh as well. If you do have a retractable knife, that would be helpful as well. That is totally up to you. Might be able to get by with the scissors. We'll see as far as we're getting on with that install. Next up, a good roll of tape. Now, you are going to need that for that lineup. You do want to have everything taped up before you start applying anything, just to make sure everything is in the placement that you want it to be, so that way you don't have any odd mistakes or hiccups coming along the road. Last, we have our Underground Graphics squeegee. Now, this is the one that is on the website. We do have some information on the top and bottom for you guys. However, it does not come with this blue strip that is at the bottom. That is a felt strip that you can purchase as well on the website from us. The squeegee generally comes blank on both sides, but if you want to add that little extra layer of protection, so that way when you're going over that graphic onto your paint, it's not scratching the graphic or your paint. However, those scratches are going to be very minimal and can be taken away with rubbing compound, so you don't have to worry about that if you have a darker vehicle. Last, we have the heat gun. Now, that is very important for after the install. It will help you to know if you missed any spots with that installation and will somewhat lift up the vinyl and cause it to not crease, but you will see small fingers or a bubble if there's some spot where you were squeegeeing and you missed just a little bit. So that is usually left last for your overall check over. Next, after the cleaning products, make sure that your hands are clean, not just your hands, but your work environment also. So whatever space that you're working in, you want to wipe more than the area of what you're working on. As for the vehicle, as well as a clean environment and a climate controlled environment, right now we have our shop set at about 73 degrees, which is great for vinyl. It doesn't cause it to tack too soon, but it doesn't leave it too cool to where the adhesive doesn't activate. So you do want to have just a little bit of playroom with that adhesive. Usually about 75 degrees is where you want it to be at the peak, and for 65 degrees to usually be the minimum where you want to be with that. If it is too warm, the adhesive will tack too soon, and if you have a pinstripe or something like that, that could be a recipe for disaster. So you do want to make sure that you have a good temperature as well with that cool temperature. If you are laying on a graphic and it is too cool, the adhesive will not tack. And if you go to pull off the mask that we have on the graphic, then it could potentially pull up that graphic as well. So to avoid any of those issues, I definitely recommend you follow those steps. Next up, we'll get into the install. It should be fairly quick. All right, so now that we've gone over the cleaning and procedures that you want to go through to make sure everything is spot on, we are going to tape everything up like I mentioned before, just to make sure it is in position for the install. Now, first, I did go ahead and place the door here. That is because it has a cutout for the door handle. You definitely want to make sure that is lined up before you get to the quarter panel. Once you're happy with your placement for that door handle, you should have about the same amount of paint showing on the top and the bottom on that handle. Once that is set and it is to your liking, you can move on to the quarter panel. Now there is a little bit of overlap. I'm gonna pull this tape up here just to show you guys. It does pull past this door seam just a little bit because that is going to tuck around the edge. Same thing as this piece here. This is going to go just up to where the door is. So again, you guys can tuck that in. I'm going to place this back here, but I am going to move this back so that way I can access the whole door without running into my own work. So let's start off with that hinge method that we have used many times before. I'm going to start here. I'm going to split it out halfway down the middle. This is when you want to get those scissors out. So we're just going to split that tape. Splitting the tape does give a bit of a marker, so that way you guys know where this is going to sit. Now, I do recommend using as much tape as you feel is necessary. The less tape you use, the more difficult it will be to have this sit where you want it to. It may potentially move around, and if it does move around while you have the backing paper off, you could run into a problem. So, to make sure we have enough tape that everything is held down just right. And using our underground graphics squeegee, just gonna start working this down. And I did get a bit of a wrinkle here, but that is in the mask and it's between those stripes, so I don't have to worry about that being a problem. So if you guys have that same thing happen to you, do not sweat it. Now, if it is above or on the vinyl, that could cause a problem. But if you're in a controlled environment like we had mentioned, then you should be able to lift that back up with no problem. And of course, I do want to mention that this is obviously a dry install, but it is dry install only. You do not want to use a slip solution of any kind or a wet solution of any kind underneath the graphic, because the adhesive will not stick properly. If it does happen to stick, then you will more than likely still have some type of moisture underneath there, and eventually that will fail. So the adhesive does end up getting killed by the wet solution of typically any kind. So you just want to make sure that you have a dry area, clean hands, and a clean vehicle. And since I already locked in that front half of it, then this back half will just swing right on over. Again, using that tape to use as a marker. Now, once I have that in place, I'm going to squeegee around the handle first, because if you can see, I have a little bit of a buckle right here where that vinyl is moving. And I want to squeegee around that handle first, just to make sure that all of that is locked in, because if I were to squeegee outside of the handle, then I would have to fight that outer perimeter of that handle. So now that I have that locked in, you can move from the handle outward. Now keep in mind, I am using overlapping strokes just to make sure that the adhesive has a good contact. Again, we're gonna use those clean hands to pull up just this edge, make sure that it lays down good and even. We'll go back up here since that's the last place that we left off. Work on this stripe. You don't want to skip around and go from only where the vinyl is touching. You do want to squeegee down that mask also, because that is going to keep everything evenly pressed down, and it's not going to distort any of the graphic that is on here. So even though I've gone down here already, I'm still going to go over it. Never hurts to go back over what you have already pressed down. Just gives you that peace of mind. So now I'm going to give this a quick once over just to make sure Now, even though that I have gone back over this, that does not mean that I am not going to heat check this. I do want to make sure that I am good for the road and that nothing is going to happen while I'm driving. Now we're going to move our tape to the mask. And I do want to mention that you want to leave the mask on until everything is applied to your liking. We're just gonna go ahead, pull that mask off. You do want to pull the mask at 180 degrees. A little spot where I missed with my squeegee. And that will prevent any type of issues from pulling the mask up. For those of you that may order this and maybe you have a type of custom design in there, if it has a pinstripe or something that is thin, you want to pull at that 180 degrees. If you pull at a 90 like this, it could potentially pull up something that you've already pressed down. And once that mask is off, it is very difficult to get that line, graphic, pinstripe, whatever it may be, back into place. So now we have that tacked down. We're going to open the door here and curve around this edge. Now, if that edge does buckle on you a little bit, you can break out that heat gun just to warm it up and get it to work easier around this corner. But luckily, we were able to get it around there without using the heat. Now, if this door is set, we can move on to the quarter panel. Now, if this helps you guys out also, if you want to just take about half of this to a quarter of this, fold it back so that way you can work that door, I highly recommend it. That way you're not moving around what you've already placed on your quarter panel. So I did go ahead and pull this side about a quarter of the way over just to make sure that it is out of the way for me doing the door. Now, I'm going to do this a little bit different over here, even though I did about a vertical 50-50 on that hinge. This time I'm going to do a somewhat horizontal pull for that hinge. This is because this top piece of the Bronco is a bit more flat than working down here. So I'm going to fold this over towards me and pull that vinyl and do somewhat of a top hinge method. Nothing too different, but you do, of course, want to make sure that your hands are clean. So once you have that top piece exposed, gonna grab those scissors again. Now we can work from that line going up. Of course, with your squeegee, since this line is here from where we cut, you do want that to overlap both the paper and where that cut path was, just to make sure you have that locked in nice and proper. Now we're going to work our way slowly up. Now that we have that locked in, we can move our tape down so that way we don't forget it. We're not driving around with masking tape on the car. We're gonna go work our way back down here, split the tape down here, and work from the top to the bottom. If you want, it might be a little bit easier for you to leave some of the paper on the back here. That way you can just keep holding it just above the vehicle and you don't have to worry about your hands touching it. You're gonna slowly work your way down. Overlapping strokes. Quick disclaimer, I do want you guys to be mindful whenever you are doing the install of this body line. If the door is placed properly, this body line should fall into place with the graphic. However, if you do need to move it about, then that is totally fine. That is definitely why you want to tape everything up before you start. Did want to mention that though. Now this is a little bit awkward of a spot. I don't know if you guys can see where it's kind of bowing right here. And there's just, has a little bit of a tension. That is totally fine. You do want to work slowly and patiently through here. You don't want to try and rush that. You could get a buckle from that vinyl. So we're just going to take our time, work it down into there, because the body does somewhat change shape right there. And this is why we keep our mask on until everything is down and set. Again, we're going to give it that once over. The once over doesn't guarantee that you have everything down, but it does give a bit more peace of mind, and typically shows you less when you go to heat check everything. So now that we have all of that, I'm going to move the last bits of our masking tape over onto that mask. And same as before, we're going to pull at that 180 degrees. And while you're pulling, you do want to keep your eyes scanning side to side, similar to like how a printer, while it's making a print, you just want to make sure that nothing is going to lift, or that if it does lift, or if you see a bubble along the way, just kind of make a mental note of it. So when you go back with your heat gun, then you know everything will be just fine and secured. And when you are pulling this mask, you definitely want to take your time and go slow. There we go. Now when you go back here, I am going to grab the heat gun because I do need to have this part just set in there, as well as the gas door. Okay, so we are going to just warm up where the gas door is, and just use that squeegee to just reveal a good clean edge of that gas door. You don't want to heat up the vinyl too much, especially if you order a satin or a matte black finish from us. That heat gun will cause a gloss if you overheat the area. So you do want to be very cautious of using that heat gun. Now we can split. You can either go from the top or the bottom, but you are going to have that blade rest in between those two panels, and you're not going to need to press hard. Just enough pressure that you can break through that vinyl. And whereas we do try to make these as easy for the DIYer, we do recommend that you guys take your graphics to a professional installer. But like I said, we do try to make this as simple as we can for the ones who like to do an install or two at home. Now, once you have the bumper and quarter panel split from each other, you can move on to the gas door here. I'll warm that up just a little bit just to make sure we're good. Now typically this is what a lot of people don't necessarily like to do, because it is a make or break type of situation when you're cutting this gas door out. But if you keep your knife snug against the door and not the quarter panel, you can typically have a good line. I'm gonna stop there because my arm can't spin around that way as much as I'd like it to. Still skating along that gas door. Definitely take your time where it curves. There we are. Now we're gonna go back over it with that heat gun. Get those edges to lay in. Some of you may see odd splits in this graphic. That is because this one is for demonstration purposes. So if you are to look at our website, we have a topography version that is reversed out showing the paint color, and a different topography version that is a dual layer with the Badlands orange on the top. And this one is the solid that we are installing. So once you have your gas door in there and set, you're gonna move up to this door. If you do have this far enough back, of course, keep in mind that body line that is down there. If you do have this far enough back, you may not need to cut this part just a little bit, but I am extremely close to the door, so I am going to just skate my blade on that door. I'm only using that door for support. I'm not using it and sliding my blade or gouging my blade into that. So now we can heat this up. Just get that to feed in to the quarter panel. And now that everything is laid down, you do want to go back over. Even though we did give it that once over with the mask on, you do want to make sure everything is laid down properly. So when you're using your heat gun, you do want to stay about 2 to 3 inches or so away from the vinyl. Again, you don't want it to stay in one place for too long. That's why I'm going around in small circles, just to make sure that heat is properly distributed. Now, wherever your heat gun is pointing, you do want your eyes to be at that same level. So that way, if there is anything that starts to pop up, you immediately see it. You don't want to wave over with the heat gun. That's not going to do anything for you. You just want to do small circles over any piece of vinyl that you had laid. And once that is set, you can hit the road. So this is going to conclude the Drift Bronco Sport addition to the Bronco Sport line. We do appreciate you guys sticking with us through the entirety of the video. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, or you would like something custom done off of this kit, then please let us know. We are here from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday, and we will be happy to answer phone calls and emails. Thank you again.